Geek Out! Hey, welcome to another installment of Catching Up. I'm Sam.
I'm Chris.
I'm Jake.
And this week we have a bit of an interview with Sean Lewis. He's coming on the of Saints fame, which is a Image Comics book, but he's here to talk about his new Image Comics series, The Few, which is out in comic book shops everywhere and on Comixology on Wednesday, January 18th. You got Hayden Sherman on art, and so it's a phenomenal looking book, very post-apocalyptic. If you like Mad Max, if you like The Road by Cormac McCarthy, definitely scratches that itch. But yeah, without much further ado, let's have Sean talk about it. And joining us this week, we have comic book writer and playwright Sean Lewis. His new Image Comics series, The Few, debuts in comic book shops everywhere and on Comixology on Wednesday, January 18th. Sean, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, unlike your previous Image series, Saints, The Few, post-apocalyptic world, very much like, say, Book of Eli or The Road by Cormac McCarthy. What made you want to shift from something like Saints to something a bit grittier and, I don't want to say more bleak, but I don't think that would be incorrect.
Well, I don't know. You quote Cormac McCarthy. I mean, that's one of my favorite writers. So I'm like, oh man, if it could be like The Road, that'd be amazing. I mean, it's really different than Saints, definitely. I think Saints always had this fine line of really kind of absurdist humor running throughout it, along with like this grotesque like religious violence. Honestly, it kind of came from Eric Stevenson at Image. We were talking around the middle of the Saints run, and he was asking me if I had anything else I was working on, and I was kind of in between things. I was doing a lot of theater projects, and he was like, "Have you ever thought about doing something kind of in a sci-fi or something away from horror and comedy?" And I was just like, "Well, yeah, I grew up loving sci-fi movies, like B movies especially, and survivalist stories were always fascinating to me." And so The Few kind of came out of that. Like I had started thinking about militias and survivalists, and then honestly, I stumbled across Hayden Sherman's art, and I'd written out a lot of the arc of the story, but no single issue at that point. And then I saw Hayden's art, and I was like, I gotta write for this kid. This kid's amazing. so really, some of the writing literally came from me looking through some of his portfolio and going like, that picture's amazing. Who are those people?
Did his portfolio have a survivalist bent too?
It had a kind of futuristic bent more than survivalist. He had these I remember there was one picture specifically where he had this cityscape and it had these two guys on a rooftop, and it looked like they were kind of surveilling the city. But the way they were dressed and their weaponry made me kind of start thinking like, oh, okay, so if I was writing something that was much further in the future, like another 60 to 80 years as opposed to like 10 or 20, where exactly are we? But even more than that, it's so weird to say this, but his line work, anyone who's seen like even the preview drawings, his line work is awesome. And it really evokes a feeling, and there's a real energy to it that more than anything, it wasn't even necessarily like character design as much as me just seeing the way that he was creating character and the way the line work was going to go like, oh, this is a gritty, rough, raw world. Like there's nothing clean about it. And so that started kind of influencing me in the writing of it. And then, yeah, we started passing it on to Eric, and right from the get-go, Eric was like, this looks really cool. This looks great. So, I respect Eric a lot. So I was like, all right, if the boss says it looks cool, it looks cool.
Yeah, there's no better validation right there.
Yeah.
What was the idea in making this more of a limited run instead of an ongoing? Was there just a very set story that you just wanted to tell?
No, I think one is being newer to comics, and also Hayden and realizing the amount of time it would take him to do an issue. One, I knew that everything I was turning into Hayden was really long. So like each issue of the book is actually like a double issue. They're each like 40 some odd pages. Because when I turned in the first one to him, I just realized that I was writing it more in kind of a chapter, like more like chapters of a book than as a set comic book where I knew I had like 22 pages and was like driving towards a cliff. And then the miniseries was honestly like, I collect comics too. And I was thinking some of the books I've loved a lot in the past year. Like I really, really fell in love with We Can Never Go Home Again, the from Black Mask, and I really liked how condensed and tight that story was, and how it was always driving towards some kind of conclusion. Like I don't know that this would be necessarily the end of the few, but I think there's so much product out there right now, and like for all of us that buy comics, I feel like every month when something new comes out, it's like in some ways I'm excited, and in some ways I'm frustrated. I'm just like, I gotta take on a whole series now. Like I don't know if I can afford this. That I just kind of was like, well, if we can make an amazing 6 issues, I feel it's reasonable to want people to buy it. It might be a weird sentence, but I think a lot about that, of just like what are we adding to what's out there right now, as opposed to just churning out material.
No, I mean,
so in terms of the miniseries, I was like, I think if we know, like for Hayden and I, like we're going to do our best 6 issues, and if people love it, then maybe we'll come back and do another 6, but that we'll take the right amount of time to really do what we think is awesome. Sure. Basically.
Yeah. I mean, there is kind of like, as somebody that also reads comics on the reg, there's like a sense of like obligation, like I can't drop it midstream. I have to keep it going, as even though it's like hitting like issue 24 or like 30, and you're just like, oh my God.
Yeah. I mean, there's some series I love that get up to that. I mean, you want to live with a story for that long. I do think this is allowing me and Hayden to be really kind of particular and careful with how we want to unfold a story too. So it's been kind of freeing and interesting as a writer to work this way, as opposed to thinking like, I think also when you're doing a monthly that you don't know an end date of, I think that there's actually an interesting kind of pressure on it, because you're trying to maintain a large arc and not give away stuff that's going to matter in issue 30, but you're also trying to keep the readers like excited from issue 5 or 6 that they'll stay around that long. And I'm like, wow, that's the people who are pulling that off have some amazing abilities. Like that's a tall order.
And I'm sure you get this question all the time, just because it's kind of a unique thing. You're also a playwright, so what's the difference between writing something where the audience is obligated to sit there for the entire story, maybe get division into acts, sometimes not, with writing serialized fiction?
Right. Well, I mean, I don't have to suffer with comic books. I don't have to suffer through sitting in the back of the audience and watching them glance at their cell phone throughout the show. So, there's the benefit of that. But no, I mean, writing the comic books has been probably the most fun I've ever had. There's something nice, with playwriting. Just to get a play up, you need so many collaborators and so many people to say yes. Like you need a theater to say yes, and then the director has to say yes, and then actors show up and they have to kind of buy into the world, and then the audience shows up, and it takes a really long time. Like from the start of a play to finishing a play, it's like 2 or 3 years easily. Mm-hmm. Where with the comic books, I found it's a lot of times it's within 4 or 5 months of us working on the book, we're kind of getting ready to launch it. I also think working with Hayden, like it's a much more intimate relationship in a way. Like, it was the same with Saints. That was just Ben and I. So like we would talk all the time about it, and we both it's like you're raising a child together. And with Hayden, I think it's the same way, that like there's a lot more of like care on both sides of like the story that we're creating. Where sometimes with theater, you're all freelance artists who like, you're bouncing around the country every couple of months to do a new show. That some shows people are like, I really care about this one, and some you're like, oh, you're definitely here for the paycheck. So I mean, it's kind of nice to know that the investment is there from the get-go. And so I mean, in that way, it's been freeing. It's also nice to live with the characters for a longer amount of time, and the lack of constraint. I mean, if I write to Hayden like, hey, I want this entire city to explode, like I was just looking at the opening pages. I just got the collected version of We Stand on Guard, and I was looking at like page 3, and there's all these missiles just falling on Canada, and I'm like, oh yeah, I can't do that in the theater. That's like really hard for me to pull off. So like it definitely allows my imagination to go in less literal places than I think theater does.
Yeah, not confined to the art department or to budget.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure there's screenwriters who cross over into comic books who love that too, that there's no there's no conversation about like how are we doing the special effects. It's like, no, his head blows off. That's just what happens.
Yeah. And I'm sure you get this question a lot too, but how did you make the jump, starting with Saints and everything from playwriting to the wide world of comic books?
Man, this is where I just make people mad. We were really lucky. We were really, really lucky. Ben and I, so Ben Mackey, who was the artist on Saints, and myself, neither of us had ever worked in comic books. Both of us had read comic books. We were working on a theater production together. I was directing a play that Ben was doing illustrations for projections. He was doing projection design. And we didn't even know each other. The drawings he was bringing in, they looked like comic book drawings. They looked like Silver Age Superman kind of drawings. And I started talking to him about like, hey, you ever want to do a comic book? And then we started talking about like, he mentioned that he'd drawn these superhero saints, and I'd gone to Catholic school. And at that point we were like, let's turn this into something. And this is where people get pretty frustrated, and I understand it, especially the more that I start doing this. We just did a cold submission. We did a full issue of Saints and sent it to Image, and they decided to do it. And it was really that. It was amazing because that was our reach. We were like, yeah, we'll send it to Image. We'll never hear from them. And then we did, like within 4 or 5 months of sending it in, we got an email from Eric saying like, let's talk on the phone. And I had a phone conversation with Eric, and it was one of those things, it's like one of those fun, like, it felt like change your life things. I think, Eric does those all the time. So I'm sure for him, he's just like, yeah, I'm just talking to another guy and letting him know I'm going to do the book. Where by the end of it, I was just like, the whole conversation, I'm like, is he going to do the book, or is he just feeling me out, or what's going on? And by the end, he was like, okay, so when do you want to turn the first issue? I'm like, oh my God, he's going to do the book. And that was the jump, is we went into that. And then Ben and I learned a lot on the fly because it's a really different business. But, the people at Image have been really great, and we're really responsive to Saints. So when the few came around, they've really been amazing with making it happen. But like I said, there's been a couple of comic creators I've done signings with at other conventions, and they're like, how'd you get your book at Image? And then I tell them, and then there's a lot of expletives kind of thrown my way.
I can totally. And of course I feel like I have to ask, is there any update on the status of Saints? Because that's been optioned for TV, hasn't it?
It has, yeah. We got optioned by a company called Automatic, who did a couple of like the Rob Zombie horror movies, like the Witches of Salem, the Salem one he did, and they have a show on Freeform, the Freeform network now, and we're right at the very beginning of it. So we signed the agreement for it, we're in December now, so 2 months ago. So right now they're in the process of like where they get a showrunner together, and they start getting the showrunner and the directors the material, and then I think we'll start going from there of figuring out. I think once they have the showrunner and the director together, from what they've told me, that's when they'll start shopping to networks, and we'll start kind of figuring out like the putting together of a pilot. But that's also been a bit of a whirlwind and a whole nother weird world to kind of find yourself in.
Golly. Given how like the relative, I guess, for ease of getting Saints, greenlit by Image, and of course getting optioned for TV, what lessons did you walk into with the few, and what difficulties with the few did you not experience with Saints?
Well, I think one I did not understand, and this is for all the real deep comic nerds listening, or aspirant writers and creators, especially with a creator-owned title. I didn't completely understand how the comic book business worked. Like, I didn't understand how, like with final order cutoffs and things like, I didn't realize it was like a store bought a certain amount of your book and those were your sales. I think I always thought it was more like a book, like the traditional publishing industry, where it was like, oh no, they'll order it from Image and this will be over a long period of time. And I didn't realize how important those early numbers are, and really how to market yourself, especially when you're completely unknown, and have a very weird book like Saints. Like we have super powered saints running around.
Yeah, it was like Catholic X-Men. I loved it.
I'm glad. I'm glad. But definitely, like some people I think get connected with right away, sometimes depending on their background or just like the weird audacity of it. And other people I think were very much like, wait, Saints? I'm not Christian. I don't know anything about this. But yeah, I think lessons wise, it was a lot of that, of just knowing how to connect with the readers and how, like I'd never used Twitter before Saints. And then Twitter became a major and incredibly fun way to interact with fans. So like going into that with the few, also understanding how to do the deadlines and how far out book. I mean, a lot of it's just nuts and bolts stuff, where it's just like, oh, we need this many copies done before the first one comes out. And this is how it's going to work when it goes to actually being published. Like it was a lot of the nuts and bolts stuff is where Ben and I would often be like, oh my God, this thing's due. Did you know it was due? I didn't know it was due. Where this time around, I feel like I have a lot more control of it, which is good because it's Hayden's first book, really. So I'm able, I think, to help out a little bit more with that of like, oh no, this is normal. Like that's okay. Like we're on top of it. So I think it's helped. It's definitely helped in that way. And yeah. And the truth is, I'm still learning. I'm sure there's things that can happen with a few that I'm like, oh man, when am I going to figure out how to do this? Because it's still all really, really new.
Well, there, comparing the few to Saints on a narrative level, something I've noticed, both books, the characters are pretty much on the run. Like there's a sense that they're being pursued, be it the titular Saints or be it Eden at the beginning of and the brothers in the beginning of the few. So is that something that you were kind of, do you do it to kind of lend a sense of urgency or just to hit the ground running?
I feel like I'm on the run from things, so I'm sure that's something subconsciously like pushing my characters. I don't know. I'm an Irish Catholic, so I invariably have tons of guilt about almost everything that's ever happened in my life. So I think that there's just metaphorically the sense of running and trying to escape things is there. And then definitely as a dramatic tool, throwing people into, with the first issue of Saints, it was very much, I knew that book was a little bit stranger than some things. So the things that I was playing with in the first issue of that was it actually had like a very traditional comic book trope to it of the gathering of a team. Mm-hmm. So even though you were meeting characters who were a bit weird and had a mythology around them and all of that, like in the end, what you were really watching was like Captain America pulling together, the Incredible Hulk and Thor to like do battle against evildoers despite themselves. Where with the few, I think would have been really fast. I started with the image. I had this image in my head immediately after I talked to Eric and he was asking about a sci-fi book. I started playing around with ideas and I just kept seeing the image of Eden kind of running through the woods with this baby, and the baby in the gas mask was like really heavily in my head. So then it just became like, where is she at? And like I live in Iowa, so putting her in like a snowy landscape became pretty easy transference. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely the dramatic tension of putting someone on the run and you throw the audience right into like, where are we and what is she running from and what are the dangers of that? But I also think that it tells you something about characters metaphorically, like characters, like a character like Eden who's on the run from the beginning. Like as you start to learn more and more about your history, you're like, oh, she's on the run from a lot more than just like this cult she was dealing with. She's got some personal demons that are much darker that are kind of connected to that.
With the, with this post-apocalyptic world that you see in the few and everything, are we ever going to? I mean, again, from Jump, the characters are being pursued, very kind of like Mad Maxian renegade figures with motorcycles, which always kind of gives them more badass cred. But how much time are we, or how much of this world are we going to see?
A good amount. I mean, we end up using flashbacks a bit to show the basically like the palace, the government from which Eden has been like working within, and to see some of her past and like the difference between the cities, which are kind of opulent and bustling, versus like where they are in the middle of these badland areas. So for people who don't know, basically what's happened is that the country has split, and basically the opulent areas of the United States have decided that like places, if you imagine a lot of the Midwest, like places that maybe don't have as much natural resource or don't create as much like gross international product and as much income, they've been cutting them off, and they're becoming like these badland areas that are just kind of open for marauders and militias and groups to kind of grow in and try and build up. So basically like we end up seeing a lot of both of those worlds, of the world that she came from that has all the opulence and the soldiers and the technology, and then this more survivalist backwoods area where people are desperately just trying to figure out how to survive.
Kind of this taking the wealth divide to its, I don't want to say logical conclusion because that makes me sound really cynical, but like to this like exaggerated conclusion.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the amount of, no matter where your politics are, I think the general anger that we have seen in the past couple of weeks, for better or worse, has probably made the book even more relevant. In terms of people feeling like they've been left behind or forgotten, and they're going to fight, or they're going to take, or they're going to domineer. I think I get really interested in that in general when I watch politics, is how angry and no matter where people fall, that there's so much of like, we're going to destroy you, like to the other, like whether you're a liberal, I feel like whether it's liberals saying it to Republicans or Republicans saying it back to Democrats, there is this level of like, no, we're going to win and you're going to learn and we're going to like overpower you. And I'm just like, oh man, where does that go? Like if that ends up being like how we deal with each other on a realm of power, like at what point does that get to like some really scary areas, which then the book kind of explores a lot of those.
Right. Is it kind of a metaphor of the us versus them mentality?
Totally, because I think that what ends up happening is you invariably, no matter where you fall, you end up demonizing the other group and saying like, no, they're stupid and they don't understand and they're not as worthy as I am. And that's dangerous. I think the one thing I fear more than anything in my life is fascism in general. And I feel like both parties have an ability to fall into that, where it becomes like, if you're not like us, then you must be an idiot, or you must be backwards, or you must be racist, or you must be evil. And so I just think once you do that, once you demonize the other to that degree, it becomes very easy to go like, we're just going to cut you off. We're just going to take everything from you. And I think that's what both sides actually fear all the time, is that the other group is taking from them. So I think the book ends up looking at more of like what happens when that becomes even more literal than people are feeling right now. That things are literally just being taken from another group that's going like, we don't think you're worth it.
So I don't know if this gives the game away. So is the titular the few that feel like, they're left behind, that they're not being listened to or not being cared for?
Yeah, that does not give anything away. Yeah, the few ends up being a group of individuals in the Badlands who are starting to try and come together. So if you imagine that a large swath of the United States has become off limits, and so what's happening is you have cults that are like Mad Max groups, and you have like Aryan Nation type militias in Montana, and you have like religious cults. Like if you had all of those things kind of starting to pop up and populate, and people moving to them whether they agree with them or not, just so they can survive, what the few ends up being is an active movement towards trying to like make those groups come together as one to try and in some ways take back the land and the things that were taken from them, which becomes tricky because it's like, when people have gone that far and have become that radicalized, what does it mean to try and team up with them? So the few is this kind of militia, off branch kind of militia group that's trying to basically like become like a version of, in their mind, they're patriots. Like they're trying to do exactly what was happening in like 1776, of like, things have been taken from us from the government that is not deserved. So we are going to get all these other groups that are like fringe organizations together, and we're going to like reinstitute what we believe this country should be. So that's what the few kind of ends up representing.
So just because comic book characters, especially in indie comics, can't catch a break, I'm assuming Eden, the baby, and the brothers are not just going to be chased by the militia, but not just the have-nots, but the haves as well, I presume.
You got it. You nailed it right on the head. You've read some books.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, they are not going to catch a break. Again, the dramatic tension of basically putting them in between the rock and the hard place is always kind of a fun place to write from. Also because of a character like Hale, Eden, her name's Eden Hale, for people who are like, why does he keep saying both of them? As we learn about her past, she especially gets put in a place where some things that she's hidden become way more dangerous because of that, because of those two separate sides, and also decisions that she's going to have to make become really, I think, what the reader follows.
I presume we're gonna see some tension between the brothers and Eden, given that they don't really, when they first meet, they don't really know each other. They're just kind of, it's a relationship of convenience. So I assume
Absolutely.
Is there going to be a lot of tension there?
Yeah, there's definitely some mistrust between them and Eden for sure, that causes a lot of problems. And then at some point we're going to meet some of her other family members, and that's not going to help things.
Isn't that the way it always goes, though? You meet the girl's family.
Yeah, I think coming out of the holidays, everyone can agree that sometimes can be problematic.
Yeah. Bracing myself for Christmas.
Right.
So you mentioned that you were kind of inspired to write Saints, seeing Ben's art. You were kind of inspired to write The Few, seeing, oh, this is going to kill me because we literally just dropped his name, and I'm pulling it up with my phone.
That's okay. Hayden Sherman.
Hayden Sherman's art. What is it that, like, seeing this art just immediately, or talking to Eric Stevenson immediately brings an image? Like, where does that inspiration come from?
I don't know. I think that actually might be where some of the theater comes from. Because theater is consistently collaborative. So you spend most of your time in the room when you're working on a new piece, especially with the type of pieces I create, that, like, a lot of times it comes out of conversation, or someone does something in the room and you're like, that's really fascinating, and I never would have thought of that. So now I'm going to use that to kind of inform what I want to make. And I think with the comic books, it's the same thing. Ben's art, some of the humor in Saints is partially because Ben's art has, like, a kind of cartoony feel. Which then when I would see the characters, I'm like, seeing this cartoony character who's, like, smoking cigarettes and wearing punk rock t-shirts, like, it allows some room to be like, oh, these guys can be kind of goofy, and, like, the violence can be really kind of over the top and super extreme because they don't look super realistic. And the same, as I said, was about Hayden and his art having that kind of a different kind of energy and really a grittiness to it. A lot of times when I'm thinking about, because I'm spending more time now than ever before thinking about the possibility of doing new books in the comic world. And I spend a lot of time, either at Comic Cons or even online, even at things like DeviantArt, just kind of flipping, when I have free moments, just flipping through art and seeing if something, like, hits me. Like, if I stop on a page and I'm like, oh, literally, I think this person has something to say that I haven't really seen before, just with the way they're drawing. And then I invariably am like, oh, I want to work with this person then. Like, if I don't know why, that's just how I tend to respond to it. Is I'm like, oh, your art's so different, or it's really hitting me in a way like, let's make something. Let's figure out how to do something together. It just seems to be, so far it just seems to be the way that the books have happened.
How has your experience, been? Because comics is such kind of the comic book culture is both very insular, but it can be very welcoming too. How has it been, like, doing cons for Saints and that sort of thing, and how has the comic community been?
They've been great. The creators have been amazing, because especially with Saints, I haven't done any for The Few yet, but in the beginning especially, like, I went to cons and I had no idea what was going on at all. Like, I think the first Comic-Con I ever did was New York Comic-Con, which was incredibly overwhelming. Mm-hmm. And like, also heartbreaking and nice wake-up calls at moments. I just remember there was a moment we went to sign up to do our signing for Saints, and Ben and I were excited. We were like, I don't know, maybe it'll be a huge book. Maybe people really love it. Maybe it'll be this. And this huge line formed in front of us. And I was just like, oh my God, this is incredible. This is like all of my dreams. And then we had a moment where we realized that Brian Vaughn was signing at the other side of the booth. Oh. And so we started to realize, like, oh, none of these people are here for our book. Like, they all have ram horns on. Like, none of them want an issue of Saints. But people were really cool even with that. Like, I think actually some of those fans saw us being disappointed and bought either pity issues or at least talked to us, which was really lovely. But like, creators like Steve Orlando, I did a signing in New York early on, and Steve, who people might know from Midnighter, and he's doing a lot of great work over at DC now. And he was amazing. He was just like, he took me out for lunch that day, and he was just like, let me tell you everything you need to know about the comic book business. And so like in the middle of Binghamton, New York, I think we ate eggs, and he kind of caught me up to a lot of things I should know or that he wished he knew, which I just thought was amazing. But he took the time to not only do it, but to initiate it. And fans have been incredible. Like people who follow the book and Saints, like that's where I was talking about Twitter before, has been incredible. It's like I've had so many people who follow us on Twitter who will just like send me messages, or they'll notice things, or that they think I might be interested, and they'll send it my way. Or like the cons I've been to, like they'll seek you out and talk to you. And like I gotta say, there is something still kind of like amazing about that. That doesn't happen as much with theater. Like theater, I think there's a relationship made in the moment in the room. And so like after the applause, you go out in the lobby and people will wait, and that's really nice. The comic book one is a little bit different because like I'll meet people at cons and then they will stay in touch with me throughout the rest of the year, and which I actually think is kind of is really cool. That like we're still kind of bouncing back and forth even though we've met like once in real life. So yeah, it's definitely totally different than what I expected, but has been really awesome.
Yeah, that's always. I mean, it's a very insular community. I'm a freelance columnist and translator for Image. I actually wrote a back issue column on Saints, for Image Plus a month or two ago.
Oh, that's all. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
That's awesome.
It was a good book, but
I appreciate it.
But I was always struck how nurturing and how like they do take care of their own, and they do keep in touch. So
yeah,
that was something that I always liked about the comic community.
Yeah, they've been awesome. Like even just like something as simple as like I think Bleeding Cool was the one who I think broke the Saints getting the option, and the amount of people who reached out to us. It felt like if you are a member of Facebook and it's your birthday and people just post happy birthday all day on your wall, like that's what that day felt like, because all these people from around the country who we've met at Comic Cons were just messaging Ben and I all day, just congratulating us, which was awesome. And they seemed so genuinely excited and happy that it was just like, it was nice to be able to share it with more than just us going like, yay, like there might be a TV show. It was kind of cool to be like, yeah, we've all kind of been sharing this thing that like Ben and I know loved, and these other people seem to love. And it was just, it was really nice. It was really nice.
Yeah, that's cool. Now, Sean, something we ask everybody that comes on the show, what are you currently geeking out over?
Oh, what am I geeking out over? Well, I am just comic books or
anything. Yeah, we had somebody geek out about making milk plastic last week.
Oh, I'm not that crafty. That would be a bad thing in the house. I'd burn it down. What am I'm excited. I'm a huge Jeremy Saulnier fan. He's the guy who did Blue Ruin, and my wife and I are going to sit down and watch Green Room today, which I've been talking about for at least a month that I wanted to watch again on DVD.
I've been wanting to watch that ever since it came out in theaters. It looks so good.
I'm beyond excited. so I'm definitely geeking out on that a lot. And I missed it when it first came out, but I've been reading the whole Jeff Lemire arc of Bloodshot Reborn. I don't know if you guys have read any of the Valiant books, and I just read The Hunt and I read the Colorado books, and they both have been just like, he's like so good.
Well, and he was saying, he was saying that it's so refreshing to write for Valiant because unlike, when he was working at DC, there isn't decades and decades of established history. He could still world build in addition to writing a recognized character.
Yeah, you can kind of feel that. I've read Animal. I've been a big fan of him for a really long time. I think I quote him sometimes because or note him at times because I had kind of gotten away from comic books for a while, and then I had a friend a while back who gave me copies of Essex County, and then I was just like, I was completely hooked again, and just spent a lot of money over the past couple of years getting back into it, all of it. But yeah, I loved his Animal Man stuff, but there's something with Bloodshot, and I could see that like it really is his own. Because I remember when I was, I guess, in high school when the Valiant books were like really, maybe it was definitely high school or middle school when those Valiant books first came out and they were like really popular. And I remember just seeing them in like the Wizard magazine. And I'd read some Bloodshot back then and it was fine. It was fun. But there's such an interesting like moral argument that he has going on in those books it just makes them that next step up. Like they're really fun. They're really exciting. There's great action. But then there's these moral questions in the middle of them. And I'm like, oh man, he's doing some really cool stuff with a character that like no shots at him, but like a character that I wasn't interested in before. Like when I first picked up a Bloodshot book, I was just like, I'll read it because it's Jeff Lemire. It's not because I'm like obsessed or interested in seeing what's going on with the character. But now I'm like, oh man, this is great. Like as long as he would do this, I would keep reading it.
Yeah, I mean, that stuff's been really cool. So I have to ask, between Green Room and Saints, were you a fan of punk rock growing up?
Yes. As my wife and I have been talking, she's been asking me what I want for Christmas, and basically every year for Christmas she now buys me punk rock T-shirts from when I was younger. So yeah, I was a very big punk rock and a very big hip hop fan growing up. Those were and still in a lot of ways are my loves. So I am now the middle-aged guy driving around our town, like blasting the Dead Kennedys and Wu-Tang Clan. So I'm sure I'm gonna
like my life goal. So
it's a little bit more odd when you're in Iowa. Like there's definitely a level of like, what's he doing? Like who is that fool?
Sure, a lot more Slipknot fans out there.
That is true. I live in an alley across from a guy who's a massive Slipknot fan. I only know because when he parks his truck every day, you can, no matter where you are in the town, you can kind of hear Slipknot blaring from it.
I guess they did, name their...
They're from Iowa.
Well, that's their album
name,
yeah. Too. Yeah.
Yeah, they're from Des Moines.
Yeah.
Golly, I guess that all makes sense now that I think about it.
Yeah. Oh, I thought you knew that. No,
well,
they're
yeah.
they are the pride and joy of Des Moines, Iowa.
Them and like Seth Rollins, the wrestler, like that's all Iowa really has going for it.
Well, Captain Kirk is from Iowa.
Right. Touche.
Not William Shatner.
Yes. Not William Shatner. No, James T. Kirk's. Yes, there's a giant sign in the town where he's supposed to be from.
So, Sean, do you have anything you want to plug before we sign off?
I just hope people buy the Few and connect with us either at cons or Twitter. I'd love to hear how people are responding to it. I think Hayden and I are both just like super excited and proud of the book. So it's fun to finally, you live with these things for a couple of months as you're developing them. So it's like, it's really exciting and fun to be at the point where like, oh, like one more month and people are actually going to have it. So yeah, and thanks for taking the time to talk about it. Like it's been a real labor of love. So it's fun to get the chance to like just spend a couple of minutes discussing it.
No, I mean, it's great. And, for all you listeners at home, if you like, The Road by Cormac McCarthy, if you like Mad Max, or really a lot of those kind of like survivalist on the run, science fiction, post-apocalyptic stories, then yeah, this definitely delivers on all that and then some. So yeah, it was a lot of fun reading that first issue.
Cool. I'm glad, man. I'm glad you got a chance to.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, Sean, thanks for coming on the show. And again, The Few #1 is in comic book shops everywhere and on Comixology on Wednesday, January 18th. Sean, thanks again for coming on.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Was that our first interview with a Slipknot reference?
I think so.
That was lovely. It was a lovely interview. I was just very quiet in the background.
It's all right. I was quiet for most of it, too.
Slipknot interview, Slipknot reference?
Yes, since he's from Iowa, or he's living in Iowa. I don't know if he's from Iowa.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
It just kind of, it cropped into the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, as you guys at home heard.
Yeah.
And I did, too.
But yeah, thanks again to Sean for coming on. But so you guys getting anything, now that we're in December, because it totally means things happen.
December to remember.
Oh. December to dismember.
Oh.
I the other night I watched Die Hard, as many people are like, oh, it's a Christmas movie. And I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah, it takes place during Christmas. But I popped it in and enjoyed it and decided, you know what, I'm gonna keep this ball rolling. Watched Die Hard Part 2, Die Harder. And then, as I am wont to do, because it's my favorite, I continued on into Die Hard with a Vengeance and rounded out the trilogy there. Because even though I do acknowledge the fourth one's existence, I still like to keep Die Hard as a trilogy just because that's how I like to remember it.
Well, I mean, there's a clear tonal shift between With a Vengeance and Live Free or Die Hard, and then there's a quality shift with A Good Day to Die Hard.
The thing I love about Die Hard a lot is that it takes a catchphrase and makes it a new catchphrase with Yippee-ki-yay.
Yeah, Roy
Yippee-ki-yay,
Rogers.
motherfucker. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it has that, you know,
It'd
again,
be like if I went, hi-ho, Silver, you fuck.
or Hi-Yo Goddamn Silver from Dark Knight Returns.
Right.
There you go.
But, like,
So Frank Miller has done it.
yeah, but, like, I don't think the Green Arrow said it since. I think he says something similar to it in the Arrow or the Legends of Tomorrow thing where he has
I just started that series.
but I haven't watched that yet.
It's
But no, I mean, Die Hard's great, man. I the first one's my favorite. I guess that's kind of like, oh, the bullshit, fuck you. But you know, I love the first one.
Yeah, it's a
the
good
second
one.
the second one has my favorite Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
Yeah.
Jet fuel.
Because
Yeah.
who the fuck is he talking to? And yeah, although I also really love. Did you watch? Have you ever seen the original ending to 3? I think we might have talked about this before. With the bazooka or the RPG.
Oh,
I have-
Russian roulette with the
Yeah.
bazooka.
I have not.
You should watch it.
It's on the DVD.
Yeah.
Oh, good, because I do have the DVD.
Dude, you should watch it. It's,
Unlike the first two, I only have it on DVD, whereas the first two I also have on Laserdisc.
But it's
Not for long. I ordered the With a Vengeance.
the cool
While
thing is
watching.
like it's a clear difference.
Yeah.
It's a clear different ending. It kind of changes the timeline too. But yeah, no, the Die Hard's cool. I need to rewatch this. It's been a while since I watched it.
One of the things while I was watching it, one of the things that I picked up on that I really liked is that unlike a lot of, or at least from my memory, a lot of especially like the 80s action movies, John McClane gets the shit kicked out of him.
Yeah.
He's like dead at the end of each movie.
Yeah.
And I like that. I think it's cool. Like to the point where in the fourth one he actually shoots himself in the climax.
Yeah, I remember leaving the theater of 4, I was so fucking bummed out because it was PG-13, whatever, but, you know, you get a certain amount of fucks in a PG-13.
Yeah.
And you thought for sure Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker, like that was going to be what
Yeah.
he saves it up for. And in the theatrical cut, the gunshot covers fucker. It sounds insane, but that bummed me out for the rest of the day. I had to go to work later, like a Blockbuster, and I was like, God
I dig
damn it.
that. I feel what you're saying.
Yeah. So I was excited
feel?
when they did the like the unrated cut, and he, you know,
That's like the only difference.
says it. Oh, in the trailer, in the trailer for Live Free or Die Hard, he says Yippee-ki-yay, like it cuts off, but he says it at a totally different part in the movie.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I love that catchphrase.
Yeah, and they're great movies. You know, I like a lot of people shit on 2, and I'll agree that it's the weakest
I've
of
only
the
seen
trilogy.
it once, all of it through, to be honest.
My biggest problem is just it takes place at Dulles Airport, and you know we live close to Dulles Airport, so like the things like talking about as if it's actually like in the heart of DC. I'm like, it's not, but I get it. Like I don't know where, you know, is LAX in the middle of Los Angeles, or you know, is it off to the side? Who knows? I mean, I'm sure plenty of people do know, but I don't know.
All right. To answer your question, no. But the no, I think what kills me about Die Hard 2, because honestly, it's like my second least favorite. So if I had to rank them, it would go Die Hard with a Vengeance, Live Free 2, and then A Good Day. But the thing that kills me about Die Hard 2 is everybody has a one-liner. It tries so hard to be fucking cool, for starters, and which is terrible. And also naked karate, but
That's
actually
the best part.
yeah, let's put that one in the plus column.
Yeah.
actually.
It also has birds.
Yeah, it does. But the
Does it?
no,
No,
but
yeah, no, I don't think it does.
The other than trying too hard, giving everybody, including John McClane, like everybody has a fucking catchphrase. Robert Patrick has a catchphrase, and he's barely in that motherfucker.
A sitting duck.
Yeah, everyone tries to sound so cool in that movie. It's like a fucking testosterone contest, and that's just bullshit. But the also it references like Nakatomi Towers too much.
Like every 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's like, hey, you're the guy. Yeah, we get it.
The Los Angeles thing. You.
Yeah, so it's a movie that tries too hard, It's a cinematic dick measuring contest.
Yeah. John Leguizamo is in it.
Yeah.
I did not know that until I was like trying to find someone else in the credits on IMDb, and I saw John Leguizamo, and I was like, did I blink and miss him? I think I did.
It's not a big role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what was I going to say? I distracted myself, and I forgot.
So, you do anything cool,
Yeah.
Jake?
Jake?
You
You didn't watch Die Hard?
No, what did I do, man? Let's see.
I don't know.
I'm going to think out loud. Stream of consciousness. I started rewatching Smallville.
Yeah.
That's a hoot and a holler. And I started rewatching. Well, I talked about rewatching Gilmore Girls. We saw Edge of 17 again. Well, I saw it again.
Yeah, I saw Edge of 17
Yeah.
since the last episode.
Yeah.
Sam
did something.
Yay! Yeah, it was pretty good.
All right.
Yeah, it was like it's in my top. I
Good
would put
old
it,
Chris response to whether
no.
it's-
If I was a Chris response, it'd be like, "Oh, what's the Give me a second. That's a Chris response.
Well, like I'm saying, when I rate movies, I'm like, yeah, it was good.
Yeah.
I liked it.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
I was bummed because I was looking for a patented like Sam Stone review on Facebook.
Yeah, like 2
And we never
pages long.
got-
I've been
never
writing.
got- I
I've been
know.
writing.
Yeah.
I've been working.
Um,
You'll get one. I
Yeah.
promise.
but yeah, no, I still dig that movie, man. And the performances in it. You know, Woody Harrelson is he's so great in that movie.
Yeah.
You know, he gets all the laughs, all the big time laughs from the Woodmeister, the Woodmeister General. But
Starring Vincent Price.
starring Vincent Price. I'm still saying "oh boy" a lot. I can't stop it. I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm saying like a lot, but that's about all I got. I got nothing. This is boring ass.
Has it
week,
just
man.
been a lot of work for you guys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sam, you do anything other than watch Edge of 17?
Which I enjoyed. It's a good coming of age film, though. I think, without going into too much detail, I think the ending is a little too pat. Solves everything a little too neatly. Ties a fucking bow on the whole thing. But
Which life does not do.
it does not. Life is a struggle, but it's a worthwhile struggle. So one of these days I'll buy my own bullshit. But I mean, it's been a fairly low-key week. Next week is the last week of classes, or I guess this week is the last week of classes at Mason, which means my job gets exponentially easier. Then I get 2 weeks off, 2 paid weeks off being in education.
Jesus
Yeah, it's pretty fucking sweet. I finally set up all my electronics at my apartment.
Oh yeah, good.
Yeah, so I can
I
actually...
was worried.
Yeah, instead of having to just watch on my iPad. I started rewatching the Super Mario Brothers Super Show.
Oh.
I forgot Lou.
Paisanos.
Right, I forgot Lou Albano is is Mario,
Mm.
and Roddy Piper shows up.
Does he?
Yeah, and so does Danica McKellar. She shows
shit.
a lot of. It's like it was basically when I watched the Super Mario Brothers Super Show. It's like I'm suddenly transported to 1987. It's all these. It's not a great show, but
Yeah.
But watching that, it's like the biggest time capsule. It's like, oh my fuck! I'm suddenly right back in there. I'm like, it's 30 years ago. Fucking what's his name? Sergeant Slaughter or something?
Mm.
Sergeant Slaughter.
Yeah, he shows up.
I saw him at a Comic-Con once.
Oh yeah.
So it's just like a WWF show.
Well, I mean, Lou Albano used to be a wrestler. So he, I guess, presumably enlisted Rowdy Roddy and
Is Cyndi Lauper on it too? Because Lou Albano and Cyndi Lauper were really
good friends.
Yeah, well, Cyndi Lauper was his manager for a little while on the wrestling.
Is that why Roddy
Yeah, and that's why. And Lou Albano plays her father in Girls Just Want to Have Fun.
Oh, I have
music video.
I'm only a handful of episodes in, so I don't know, but
Yeah.
There was more than a handful of episodes.
it's seriously, dude. There's 52 episodes,
Holy fuck.
and then there's 13 Legends.
Almost made it to syndication.
Almost, but after 52 episodes, they rebranded as Super Mario Brothers 3, Super Mario Brothers 3, the show, to tie in with the game.
Okay.
And then to tie it a couple years after that, it became Super Mario World to tie into that game.
Gotcha.
So if you combined all the Mario shows, it's shitloads.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm having breakthroughs.
Not now. I'm having breakthrough.
While you were talking about setting up your electronics, you reminded me that I borrowed John Carter from you.
Oh, yes!
And I watched it, and it was exactly what I expected. It was it's not a great movie by any stretch, but it's not awful. Like, it got a lot of shit, I feel, and I don't think much of it is warranted. But it definitely suffers from being far too ambitious.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be as long as it does.
For sure. It needed to be about an hour shorter than it was.
I don't know.
Maybe like 45 minutes, 30 minutes.
It doesn't need to be over 2.5 hours. Yeah. But it's very clear that was the last like Star Wars level thing that Disney tried to do before getting Star Wars.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were like, you know what? Maybe we should just get fucking Star Wars.
We really want to do space, but we can't do it. Let's just buy someone else who already is doing it.
Well, if you think about it, so the first Star Wars level like thing they did is the black hole, and then they did Tron, which they tried to do twice. And
Josh is still pulling for a third.
I would love a third. I like Tron Legacy.
No, I would. Yeah, I would enjoy that.
I might like Tron Legacy better than original, like OG Tron. I might go that far. Yeah.
Okay.
Just because there's sometimes where I watch like OG Tron, and I'm just like, the fuck. But it's got Master Control Program, which is always cool. And it's got the Jeff Bridges scream, which is iconic in its own right. But no, I think that, and then I feel like they kind of, Dick Tracy was supposed to be Disney's Batman, and then the Rocketeer was supposed to be Disney's Batman. And then what the fuck else did they do after that? I guess it was just animated from then on.
And then like the Pirates of the Caribbean, I guess, was like that's Disney, right?
It is.
Yeah.
They were like, let's make rides out of our Earth
movies out of our rides,
right? Because there was originally supposed to be they were supposed to be a Space Mountain movie. There was a Country Bears movie, which kind of came in.
There was the
Haunted Mansion.
Well, yeah, that I'm Tomorrowland.
Yes,
which did all right.
Not as well as they hoped.
Yeah,
certainly not as well as they hoped.
It came out.
Yes.
I mean, I never saw it.
I don't remember it being released on home video.
But
I'm sure it has been. But I don't remember even seeing adverts for
John
it.
Carter's thing, which is weird because it should have got people's interest, but it backfired horribly, was that it was like, this is what inspired Star Wars. And for some reason, people were like, fuck that. Yeah. And people, you would think people would have been like, oh, let's see what helped. This is two of the biggest things that it pulled for that it inspired was Star Wars and Superman. And for some reason people were like, fuck you. Although I remember like seeing the trailers for it, and I was like, I don't give a shit.
Yeah. It was set to they set it
Kashmir,
to
right?
Kashmir. I was like, what
God.
the fuck?
Well, it was like super bland, and like the name was horrible. Like, I remember the whole idea was like, well, because
I feel
he
like
becomes
the Princess of Mars,
John Carter of Mars, and yes, Princess of Mars is like, yeah, okay. John Carter just doesn't tell you anything. Anything. It's like, is this fucking
Michael Clayton?
Yeah, this is a documentary about a Civil War veteran flute player. I don't know, like
to the extent that every time until recently I would think of it, I would call it John Connor, and then be like, no shit, that's the kid from Terminator.
Yeah. But I mean, and also this is a weird thing. Like, I wish Taylor Kitsch didn't have long hair. Like, I know he's Dreamboat Annie, and like, he's from Friday Night Lights, and I get it. He's the Han Solo of Friday Night Lights, and he's awesome. I like Taylor Kitsch, but I don't know why he has long hair. I mean, he could have cut it. Bryan Cranston gets fucked over in that movie pretty hard. It's pretty funny.
Right? I start watching it, and I'm like, Bryan fucking Cranston.
Yeah, like he gets spoilers, but like he gets shot, and like he's dying, and then John Carter's like, I'll help you, and then he's like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting transported to Mars, and then you just bleed out and die.
If you think about it, Bryan Cranston's character isn't in the wrong at all.
No,
no.
John Carter's being a dick, so they try to arrest him, and then he beats the shit out of Bryan Cranston. Like, he breaks his nose, and then he escapes, and he's like, I gotta go get him. And then they get ambushed, and he gets fucking like mortally wounded.
And then John Carter's like, all right, I guess I'll help, but like in the process,
and then he gets spirited away.
Yeah, the book's really good. If you get, I know Sam's read the book, but
I mentioned it to my dad, and he was a huge fan of like all those like those books, the John Carter stuff, Tarzan,
Same guy.
all that.
All the Edgar Rice Burroughs.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then I guess the movie came out on the 100th anniversary of the book, which is pretty cool.
Mhm.
And it is, it's a cool story. Like it's a huge epic, and there's plenty more than just one book. And that's something I wish there was a sequel, because that it gets to be like the war and like the huge kind of
something that really surprised me was how good it looked. Like the CGI really is amazing.
Yeah.
Like from how poorly it was received, I expected it to be just a shit show.
Well, I think what happened,
it was a $300 million. That was the problem. Like, just because a movie doesn't do good at the box office, guys, doesn't mean it's bad. Because it cost like $300 million to make, and it did not. Like, factoring in marketing and distribution.
Absolutely. And then once Disney saw that it wasn't going to make its money back after the first week, it just pulled the plug.
Yeah. No more marketing, or just like
it was a bad year for Taylor Kitsch. I think Battleship was that year too, which was fun. I like John Carter way more than Battleship.
I still haven't finished Battlefish.
It's not a great movie, but it's fun. It's got Rihanna.
Let me see your work.
Let me see your time.
I hate that song so much.
There's just her best song ever is a song called "Kiss It Better." It's like the best song ever written, but it's off of I can't remember the name of the album. It's gonna fucking make me so goddamn mad. But fucking Anti. Which is like her masterpiece. But that's about it.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Can't think of anything else.
Honestly, it's been kind of, we're in the lull between holidays.
Yeah.
I other than The Edge of 17, I haven't really seen anything, and Jake pretty well covered The Edge of 17 in last week's episode. I do want to see Manchester by the Sea.
Yes.
I saw the trailer to La La Land lately, and I was like, oh, this is gonna be so fucking good.
Yes.
Obviously, next week we see Rogue One.
Mm-hmm. Did either of you guys watch the Guardians of the Galaxy trailer?
Yeah.
I still haven't watched it. It came out the other day.
It looks really fun, man.
Yeah.
Looks really fun.
Yeah.
All those fuckers.
Well, here's like prepared. Prepared to hear Fox on the Run a lot, but that's cool because I love Fox on the Run. But like that's the new Hooked on a
You
Feeling.
do now.
Yeah. No, it's the fucking shit. I didn't know dick about Hooked on a Feeling before Guardians, but if the whole fucking soundtrack was sweet, that would be sweet.
Cool.
Or the sweet. It depends. They had different things going on.
Yeah, like the Jam.
Yeah.
The Ram Jam Band.
Mm-hmm.
No, just the Jam.
Just the Jam.
Yeah, British post-punk at its finest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's literally. I mean, again, we're kind of in this lull, but
Yeah.
you know what it is in the lull? The Few by Sean Lewis and Hayden Sherman, which comes out everywhere in comic book stores and on Comixology on Wednesday, January 18th. So get in on that. And check out The Saints. That was a great book. Like I was saying to Sean, it's like Catholic X-Men.
Yeah, I hadn't had a chance to read it ahead of time, but after hearing you guys talk about it, I was like, I'm Catholic.
Yeah. Yeah.
That sounds cool.
I'll let you borrow my copy.
Cool.
Yeah. So, without much further ado, this has been another installment of Catching Up. I'm Sam.
I'm Chris.
I'm Jake. Thank you very much.
Good night, Eric Bana.
This has been another Geek Out production. If you enjoyed what you heard, hey, we've got a new commentary every Monday. We've got a special episode every Friday. Of course, there's the usual Catching Up show every Wednesday. And you get book club episodes just about every Tuesday these days. Thanks for listening.